where I work, UCLA. Most of the students here have spent the first 18 or so years of their lives preparing for this moment. To be accepted to a university. This is the world we know. Hyper-competitive students doing everything they can to get ridiculous grades and prepare for college, to eventually become knowledgeable and productive members of society. Now let's back up for a second, more than a second. To understand how we got here, we must understand the history of education itself. For the purposes of this presentation, I will focus on the Western model of education. Education has been this way for so long that many of us might think that this is the way it's always been. But in reality, modern education is a relatively new development when looking at the history of education in its entirety. Now let's take a quick look at the ancient times to know where we all came from. Writing was first developed in ancient Sumer around 5,000 years ago. Most of the early writing was used to keep track of trade goods and livestock, since the creation of agriculture and farming had for the first time created a surplus of food products and a move towards higher levels of social stratification. The ancient Greeks were some of the earliest to formalize education models. These early schools were set up to prepare young male Athenians to participate in public life and also the democratic process. Let me note, these were not free public schools, but rather these young men's families paid a tuition to a private tutor. In the Middle Ages, the Roman Catholic Church monopolized educational opportunities. Priests and clergy members learned Latin and Christian doctrine. The important takeaway from these early educational models is to understand that education was not intended for the masses. It was something only available to mainly men of a certain class. Now let's fast forward to the Industrial Revolution. It was during this time, around the late 1700s and early 1800s, that we see our current educational model take shape. The model is based on efficiency. We enter school around 5 years of age and work together in age-based cohorts. This means 7-year-olds work with 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds work with 8-year-olds, and so on. We move together with this group through our years of schooling, each student in the cohort supposedly learning the competencies for each grade level. The speed is fixed, meaning every student has roughly 10 months of instruction per year to attain the information for each grade. The speed may be fixed, but what is variable is how well each of these students understands. For many students, a lot of the information is missed or lost, yet they are being pushed forward on this mill to the next grade level. At some point along this assembly line, we look at the product. We say some of these students are better than others. We move them into a different bucket. And some of these students are not as bright as the others. We move them into a different bucket. This is called tracking, also known as the Prussian Model, inspired by the Industrial Revolution. As much as we can be critical of this model, let us remember this was the first educational model to aspire to educate the masses, every citizen, for free, not just the very wealthy. The only way the Prussians knew how to do this was to use the industrialized model. We have continued to use the Prussian model of education for the last 200 years. But I'd like us to take a look at moving forward in education. I could already see how technology and the internet are transforming the traditional Prussian model. With the advent of the internet, we now have the ability to distribute lectures as a video component that could reach millions of viewers. Video lecture and other web-based learning tools allow students a more customized learning experience. We no longer have to batch all of our students into these rigid buckets based on age. Students can now work at their own pace and get feedback at their own pace. With video lectures and passive aspects of learning being done at home, we now actually free up the actual class time space. They can be used for more active learning, more small group discussion, and direct feedback from the teacher. Now I challenge you to imagine what education might look like in the future. What do you think education might look like in 10 years, 15 years, 100 years from now? Leave your comments below, and thanks for joining me today for this presentation.